Hi, folks. We're back. Thank you for joining me again. We're going through the book of Genesis. Today, we're going to start on verse 24 in the first chapter of Genesis. If you have your Bible handy, please open up. If not, just listen. And I'll read the passage. So here we go. Verse 24. It says, "And God said, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind. And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." Okay, that's the end of the passage that we're gonna talk about today. And of course, it's an important passage because it talks about the creation of humanity. So let's take a quick look at this. So the passage begins with the Lord creating animals. He says, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds. Okay, so once again, God is saying that there will be very specific species, and they will all stick to their kinds. Okay, they will all propagate according to the design that the Lord gave them. So there will be cats, and there will be dogs, and there will be cattle, and there will be mice, and there will be lizards, and there will be all sorts of animals, land animals, that will live on the land. Okay, some of them will be used for livestock. So already the Lord is saying some of these animals are going to be tamed, and man will look after how they breed, what they eat, where they go. That is livestock. That is cattle. That is basically animals for farming. So the Lord already says some of these animals are going to be cared for by man. Okay. And then he calls the rest of them the creatures that move along the ground and the wild animals. Okay. So we have creatures that move along the ground, which can be anything like mice. We could probably should put insects into that category. So ants and worms and beetles and you name it. And so we also have the wild animals at the end. So animals that will inhabit the earth but do not come under the control of man. They are not livestock. They are not farm animals. So each according to its kind. So once again, cows will have cows, and cows will breed with cows, and breeding a cow with a horse is not a possibility. It just doesn't work physically or in any biological way. So let's see. Let's go to verse 26. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. Let us is how the Lord begins. Let us. So who's us? Who is us? And I think I mentioned in the very first session that when we first meet God in the very first passage of Genesis, I'm just going to go back. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The word in Hebrew, Elohim, is a plural word, meaning that God is not one, is not single. It doesn't mean there's many gods. It just means that within the being that we call God, there is a number of persons. Um, and of course, you've probably heard the word Trinity. You've probably heard of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And those are definitely a part of God's existence. And God also talks about the sevenfold Spirit later on in the Bible, and there is definitely the idea that God is not alone. God does not exist alone. He is not lonely. He doesn't need company. Those in his presence are a part of him. When he addresses and says, "Let us make mankind in our image," some people say, well, he's probably talking to the angels. He's probably talking to heavenly beings. He's probably talking to spirits that are with him in heaven. I'm not saying that's impossible, but when he says, let us mankind in our image, is he saying, let's make mankind in the image of the angels? I don't think so. And why not? Well, because right after this, he says, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals. Okay, so because he uses the word so, that is an explanation what this image really is all about. He is made in God's image so that he may rule over all the other creatures in creation. Okay, why? Because God rules over all the creatures in his creation. And of course, God's creation is bigger than our earth, is bigger than our universe. And so whether we're talking about angels, any kind of spirit beings or beings in other worlds and universes that God might have made, we're saying that God rules over all of them. He is their maker. He is their father, and he is the one that rules like a king over them all. So when he says, let us make man in our image so he may rule, he is saying that man will reflect God's ability to rule over all that is created here on earth. In fact, we can easily say that all of those animals, all of those things, all of those fish and birds and plants, they are all created to be ruled by man. God has created them for us. God has created the plants as food, the animals as companions, and later on we'll find out that they are to be food as well. Maybe not necessarily the original part of creation, but our mandate to rule, our ability to rule over them, makes us a god. And I'm saying a god in quotation marks. We are not gods, but we are to be as God to these creatures, to this creation. We have the final say about how they live, where they live, if they live. They are made for us, and we have complete dominion over them. That doesn't mean we can be mean or cruel or disregard the animals. We need to be caretakers, of course, especially because God says, some of these animals are specifically created to be cared for by man, and that is the whole idea of livestock. That is, livestock is to be cared for. It's not just created for us to slaughter. No, quite the contrary. We are to look after them, care for them, feed them, appreciate them, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Let's go back a little bit though and talk about this image. Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness. Okay, so first and foremost, we talked about that God is a plurality. He says us, as in we will make man in our image. Um, and the idea is that man too. Well, let's not jump the gun here. Let's talk about this image. Does that mean that God has two arms, two legs, a head, eyes, mouth, all of those things that we define as a human being? Does he have, five fingers on each hand, and does he walk around upright like we do? Those are interesting things to think about, and certainly God appears as a human being many times in the Bible, but those are not necessarily the aspects that he's talking about here. Okay, so first and foremost, I would say that the ability to rule. Okay, as we rule, that means we are making decisions and judgments for somebody who is of lower ability to make judgments and decisions for themselves. So, for example, with regards to cattle, with regards to livestock, we are the ones that make the decisions, make the rules, right? We have control over them, so we are able to make decisions. We are able to make judgments. We are able to enforce those controls on the livestock, right? We keep charge of them. We are the caretakers. Okay, so that is an aspect of God. Okay, God says, I am like that. I am like that shepherd looking after his flock. I have the final say of where they go, what they do, how they eat, what they eat, right? When they sleep, when they travel, all of those things. God says, I am like that, and you are to be like that to the livestock I give you. Okay, so how else? How else do we resemble God? Obviously, in these passages that we've been looking at the beginning of this book, we can see that God is a creator. And we can see that he is also very, very creative. We can see the variety of animals. We can see the incredible bodies from, hippos to alligators to elephants to dolphins to the different types of dogs that we have to on and on and on and on, the beautiful birds that we have. There's just so much out there, such variety all through the earth, from the smallest insects to the biggest mammals. God is very creative. If you ever feel like God is so distant and so you're so unable to understand him, just look outside the window or pick up a picture book. Look at the trees and the flowers. Look at the beautiful things, even the common things that are around us. I'm looking at a pine tree right now, and it's magnificent. It's just a beautiful thing that smells good, and just even on a winter day, it is green. It's something that cheers the eye, and birds live in it, and it gives shade, and it can be used for firewood and construction. It's such a common thing, and yet the design of it, how it grows from a little seed from a pine cone into this magnificent, huge tree that's 50 feet tall and uh, feeds itself from the ground, and it provides so much for us if we ask it to. And or if you look at the design of a bird, the feathers, the colors, their ability to fly and maneuver through the air. They're common things. Just a little sparrow that comes and sits on this little bush outside the window here. Sometimes you look at it and it's just such an incredible little thing. It's so smart and so able to survive here in Canada outside in sometimes in -40 weather. This little sparrow is able to find food, keep warm, right? Wait it out till spring, make a nest, have babies, right? You know, it's just an incredible little thing, and so fast and so maneuverable in the air, able to fend for itself, to survive. Um, that's God. That's God's design. It's not it's not chance. These little things or big things that surround us, simple things like grass and flowers, so beautiful, so full of color and so fragrant. Some of these flowers. We have a wild rose bush too inside, just outside the house here. Just wonderful smell, beautiful to look at. God is an artist. God has a heart of an artist, the mind of the most incredible engineer and designer. If we're into our arts and crafts, God is the ultimate arts and crafts person. He is the ultimate designer, builder. Um, if you're into construction or engineering, wow, God is hands down the most incredible, intricate engineer and designer. So, he um, has given all of this to us. He has created the most incredible works of art, the most incredible engineering things, the most incredible, beautiful things, and He has given them to us. So we've inherited that sense of art, of creation, of design, whether it's building houses and building shelters, whether it's making tools or using tools, whether it's drawing pictures or making art or making clothing or whatever it is, that creative spark, that desire to make something that's usable and beautiful to look at. We directly inherit that from God. Okay. So, what else did we notice about God? Well, God is a communicator. God speaks all of these things into being. He says, "Let the land produce living creatures," right? And so it happens. Living creatures appear on land. Let there be light, and there is light. God speaks. Okay, God uses words. God communicates. That is a huge part of our existence too. Here I am speaking to you. I wish you didn't have to look at me, and maybe I will put some graphics in some of these videos. But I am communicating to you right now, and so God chooses to communicate words. Okay, He is in the presence of other beings, and He has multiple persons also within Himself. He is never alone. When He speaks, these words are not going out into the emptiness. They're not going out unheard. Okay. Not only that, but God made sure that later on these words were written down. And by the way, just as a side note, yeah, it is Moses who very much later on writes these words down. He spends large amounts of time sitting in God's presence in the tent and writing down these passages that we're reading right now. It wasn't Adam or Eve or somebody way back then who wrote this down. It wasn't God Himself who dropped the Bible out of the sky. But later on, with Moses, He takes the time to make sure that Moses writes all of these things down for us. And so that once again, He communicates. He communicates through actual words, audible words, and now He's communicating through the written word, which is very important because our memories are frail, and we forget things, and sometimes things get twisted up in our minds, in our memories. Sometimes we add things that are not there to our stories. Sometimes we take away things that are important from the stories we tell because we forget. Or sometimes we can even have an agenda, which means that we want to change things because we want to change the story. And that's never good. And so God says, write it down. Write it down, read it, copy it, write it down carefully, make careful copies so that these words do not get changed. Okay, so God is a creator, God is a communicator, God is a ruler, right? God rules over His creation. So those are some of the traits that we have we have uh, as creatures made specifically in His image, specifically. And there's so many other things. I mean, if you look at man, we are created to stand upright. You can say, bears can stand upright and dogs sometimes, and you've got chimps and gorillas that sometimes stand upright. And no, we are definitely made for it, though. That's all we do. We can get on all fours and walk around, but most of the time we will be standing upright. We teach our children to walk upright as soon as they can, and we spend our entire lives walking, running, uh, going about our business upright on two legs. Now, why is that important? The most important thing about this is communication. That we face the world faces us. We face each other. We are meant to be displaying everything that's here, our faces, our emotions, our responses to the world, right? It comes directly at us. We're not animals that are meant to be sniffing down on the ground or built in such a way to defend ourselves or, you know, or be aggressive attack animals with, bodies and faces shaped for combat. We are meant to take in directly and also emit emotions, communications. We come face to face to each other and to our Maker. That is how God designed us. That our body is full on display. We do not. Right. We're not on all fours. We're not. It's an important thing to talk about because it's a part of God's design. He said man will face the world, right, fully, and he will also absorb or receive the world fully. Um, we are distinct in that way. The other thing we talked a little bit about is creativity. God is a creator. He is a creative creator. He has a vivid imagination. He has vivid abilities to design and construct things. In many ways, we have inherited that ability, that imagination. For us, we can come up with ideas, designs, pictures in our heads, right? Like this picture behind me. Somebody used a paintbrush to draw all of that. Whether this is taken from a real scene, it's a prairie scene with some grain elevators and a sunset or a sunrise on a day. There's some harvested wheat down here in the front, and um, somebody probably just drew that out of their mind. They were out of their head, out of their imagination. They were probably just sitting in front of an empty canvas and said, I will draw this autumn scene, prairie scene. Maybe they had some inspiration looking out of a window or looking at a photo, but probably just a scene, just a generic scene of a rural community. So, yeah, we can do this. We can do this. We can draw faces that have never existed before. We can make designs and patterns and clothes and build houses that we think up of how they're going to be positioned and what size they're going to be and how many rooms they will have. We can come up with those things. But not only that, it goes deeper than that because as we are listening to others, like when you're listening to me, even if you don't have the Bible and you don't have any picture books that show pictures of creation and all of those things, guess what? As I'm talking about the animals, as I'm talking about God, your brain is producing images for you. It's recalling memories. It's trying to think about the Earth and planets and all of those things that I've been talking about, the sun and the moon, right? Birds and fish, all of those things, whenever they're mentioned, ideas produce pictures or recall pictures in your mind, right? So if I started talking about a fish that has a trunk like an elephant and has wings like a bird, something that never existed, you're trying to imagine it as I'm talking. And so that is an important part because as God speaks, as God gives us his word, he has given us an ability to take it in either through the ears, right? Or as we read it off the page of the Bible, right? Even though we are not necessarily hearing it, in our mind's ear, we are hearing it. And in our mind's eye, we are creating those scenes. So as we read about the days of creation, as we read about the creation of all these animals, right? Our mind keeps up. Our mind creates the story. That is so important because the Word of God is so important. He has made sure that most of us have this ability to recreate this Word in our minds, so we can recall it, so we can pass it on to others, so we can write it down, so we can discuss it like we're discussing it here, so that it becomes real in our minds. Okay. Let's see. One more. I'm not sure if we read 27. I will read verse 27. It says, "So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them." Okay. So the Bible gets into more detail later on, talking about male and female creation. But it's mentioned here. In this account, we basically have the 7 days shown. Sorry, we're only on the 6th one, but we have the days of creation shown one at a time of what was done, and on the 6th day now we have man and woman being created. So let's look at 27 again. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. It's kind of interesting that God repeats this twice. Created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. So there is no doubt that they were created in his own image. Okay, so he makes sure that they are created in his own image. Okay, not in the image of some god, not in the image of the angels, in his own image. Okay, so he basically looked at himself, said, "These are my characteristics. This is what I want mankind to inherit from me. These are the traits that he will have that would display who I am." Okay, and he put those characteristics, put those traits into mankind. And then it says again, in the image of God, he created them. Okay? So this just kind of is there to clarify things, to solidify things. He, God, once again, he, not someone else creating man in God's image. He did this and created them plural. Once again, God chooses to make more than one. Okay? He says, and we'll get to that later, that mankind should live in a plural way. Okay? Anyways, we'll get into all of that during our next session. And thank you for joining me, and we'll pick up in verse, probably in verse 27, 28 next time. Thank you.